as I watched that, I just was surprised at how the donkey kind of ambled along, just made its way and then wandered over there because it saw something interesting off the road, ate an apple and a few leaves over on the other side, and just kind of meandered along. Completely the opposite of probably the most famous donkey that most of us remember, the donkey from Shrek that just continually says, "Shrek, are we there yet? Shrek, are we there yet?" You can see a picture of Shrek and the donkey on the screen, and Shrek looks slightly cheesed off. The donkey is completely unaware of how annoying and bickering and just keep prodding the donkey is. I wonder what the donkey was like that Jesus made his journey into Jerusalem on. I wonder if that donkey meandered and stopped before the crowds got there, because it's quite a long journey and they had to kind of shoo it along. Come on, we've got important business to do. The start and the end of Jesus' life begin with journeys on donkeys. The journey at Christmas to Bethlehem in the womb of a teenage girl called Mary before she gives birth to him in a stable, probably a cave on the side of the road where they kept animals. And this final journey, the week before his crucifixion, which we call Palm Sunday, when Jesus journeys into Jerusalem. Jesus comes into Jerusalem on a donkey, echoes Zechariah chapter 9, the prophecy of God's chosen one coming into the city. But we would have thought, if we were Jews then, they would have come in on a horse. So that's an animal of war, of power, of control. It's large. And let's not forget, Pilate had come in the opposite end of the city at a similar time to Jesus to oversee this festival, to make sure that there were no eruptions. He didn't want to be in Jerusalem, Pilate, but he came in just to monitor things. And Jesus comes in on a tiny donkey. Jesus comes in and people take down palm branches. So I was walking home with Amos, my son, from school. He's 8 on Friday, and he, as I was talking to an adult I hadn't seen for ages, tore off a piece of a fir tree and was dusting the path. And I said to him, "We're not taking that home." And then on Saturday, my wife Jo said to me, "Why have we got this branch here?" He just snuck it in the house and laid it in our welcome hall. It's tiny, it's pathetic, it's not going to make much of a difference, although Amos's intentions in sweeping the path by Woodland Walk were well intentioned. Tiny palm branches laid down that a few days later with dust or rain or sun would have been scorched, withered, gone. Cloaks. These are not rich royal people. These are people that have come to Jerusalem for the festival. They would have had on cloaks that were dirty, dusty, sweat-stained, food-stained, and they lay them down with baked beans and fried eggs on them with the smell of a gymnasium. It's a tiny gesture, really. Not the cloaks that would have been laid down for the anointing of King Saul or King David when they became kings in the Old Testament. Jesus cries over Jerusalem, says some confusing words. It's a tiny action. No one really understands what he's doing, and he doesn't pause to explain. And then Jesus goes in the temple, and he turns over the tables in the temple in his anger. Now, if I read it correctly, John's Gospel says that Jesus did this at the start of his 3 years of ministry, so we could read it that Jesus did this twice. One time they let him get away with it. It's a tiny action at the beginning of John. This time, 3 years later, right, this is becoming a habit. We need to stop this guy. And let's remember, the temple at this time in the festival of Passover would have had 20, 30,000 people in it, swollen to 10 times the usual amount of people worshipping. Jesus turning over a few temples at one end of the temple, turning over a few tables at one end of the temple, wouldn't have stopped things from happening. It would be like the Sunday I remember here about a year and a half ago when somebody was bringing the coffee urns round the corner of the building and up the slope. Do you remember the building? And they were going to put them there, and I was in my study and I heard clang, and one of the coffee urns fell over and all of the coffee went on the carpet. This happened at about 9:15 in the morning. When you came in at 10 o'clock, or maybe 10 past 10 if you're one of those folk, you wouldn't have known that coffee had been tipped over and that it had stained the whole carpet. It had been dried up. There was a slight stain there, but it was dry and the smell had gone. Jesus turns over the tables, but things carry on. It's such tiny actions. Do they have any massive ramifications? We have over 41 million domesticated donkeys in the world at the moment. Simon Barnes, in his book about animals, that I really recommend you buy if your children aged 8 or 9 or above are interested in animals. He says donkeys were humanity's first major labour-saving device. They've been helping us out with the heavy lifting for more than 5,000 years. We have thanked them by using donkey and ass as terms of abuse ever since. But at the same time, we have always had a deep affection for donkeys, for their perceived loyalty and uncomplaining nature. However, he does say horses are heroes, donkeys are workers, comic, despicable, useful, and above all, lowly. If you have a donkey to help you with your work, it's because you can't afford anything better. Donkeys fulfill extremely basic needs. They are dirty job specialists. Let's hold that quote there on the screen and let's link that to Jesus' birth and Jesus' final week. They are dirty job specialists. Donkeys fulfill extremely basic needs, like bringing in the Son of God to be born into this world, like carrying the Son of God to the city where he will hang on a cross just a week later and die to bring healing and wholeness between God and all of creation, which includes you and includes me. Have you ever heard someone, or maybe you've said it, I'll do the donkey work. It's a woe is me comment, isn't it? Basically we're saying, I'll do the lowly jobs then. I'll do the things that don't get any glory. I'll do the small, maybe insignificant things. We say that, and then we say that we'll do the donkey's work. I remember sitting in a yellow Renault car when I was 16. I'd been to a careers evening at Tonbridge Grammar School for good-looking boys. And as we came out, we'd been through various classrooms looking at what I could do. And I'd always wanted to be an architect. I did and still do love drawing. But I remember sitting in the lecture on architecture and hearing that you needed to go to university for 7 years. And I thought, there's no way I want to be in full-time education by the time I'm 25 years of age. And so I sat in that yellow Renault, my mum and dad in the front talking. They weren't following Jesus at this point, but I was. And I remember thinking, God, I've said that I've given my life to you. And we do that in bits and pieces, don't we? And we take some bits back and then we give it wholeheartedly again and we snatch another bit back. And I said, God, but I've not thought about what I'm going to do with my working life. And that's a major part of my life. All of this was in my head. It would have freaked out my parents if they'd heard me talking like this. And I just said, God, can you show me, please, what you want me to do with my working life? And over the next 2 years here at this brilliant, blindingly brilliant church, God slowly revealed that actually I might be all right at being a minister. We had a large cauliflowered-haired Baptist minister who just turned up. I clicked with him. He took me under his wing long before I dated his daughter. And he began to teach me, gave me a book on Greek, didn't understand it, so he gave me a book by John Stott, I was kind of okay, gave me a book about a Methodist minister, I thought I might read that, and he said he was an Arsenal fan, so I definitely read it. And then you let me do talks here at Boys Brigade in the junior section. I remember one summer youth camp, the guy that was meant to be leading our tent devotions, that's where 6 to 8 of you sit there and someone leads the conversation, he was ill and couldn't come to camp. And Henry Austin, my captain, sat me down and said, look, I know you're younger than most of the guys in the tent, but we want you to lead this. Gulp, okay. And we kind of got through it. I remember I led the talks at one of the Girls Brigade and Boys Brigade summer camps. And they were fairly rubbish. Year before, you'd had Dave Hitchcock, he'd done a brilliant job. A few years before that, it had Steve Chalk, stonking. Loads of people had come to faith in Jesus. The year I did it, no one came to faith, no one that we could see. And I remember Julian Holdsworth, the captain then, saying, Neil, we don't know what God's doing in the background, but you have served him as best you can. And then you sent me to Bible college, and I finished full-time education at the age of 25. Went to Bexhill-on-Sea for 5 years where Joe and I had a ball and we were loved by most of the people there. 12 years at Bessells Green in Sevenoaks where God did some wonderful things. And in that last couple of years, I kept driving past this church building to Tonbridge Angels Football Club, where I was the chaplain, wondering what was going on here. And then sat in my study in Bessells Green one day with Steve Cole, and we nursed a coffee. And he said, you know, I wonder if we should explore you and TBC. Now I'm here. Back where I found Jesus. Back where you loved me and looked after me, cared for me when friends died too young, helped me through romantic struggles, fled from me at romantic offerings, and everything in between. Those small decisions can have massive ramifications in our lives. Walter Brueggemann is the preeminent Old Testament professor in the Western Church when it comes to understanding what the first part of the Bible means. He's 87 years old now. He's written nearly 60 books. He's still writing and going strong through this pandemic. Why did he become a theologian and a minister? In an interview book that I read with him, he says, I didn't want to do a degree in English literature because writing in English scared me. So I looked at what my brother was doing. He was a year older than me, and he went and studied theology. So I thought, I'll go and study theology. And then my older brother went and became a minister. So I thought, I'll become a minister. There was no blinding light. There was no glory word from God. Walter Brueggemann went into ministry because he was scared of writing using words in English. And God used it. And he has written nearly 60 books that have shaped the way so many of us view the Old Testament. You see, even those small decisions that we make out of fear, those small decisions that we make because we're cowards, even those, God can use them. And some of us are sitting here this morning and we're thinking, well, Neil, I didn't make a yellow Renault decision that was a positive one. I made a Walter Brueggemann decision because I was scared. And God says, yeah, and I can cope with that. Because some of those people that were laying their cloaks on the floor and palm branches on the floor were doing it because the rest of the crowd were. They didn't understand why. They were scared. They thought, I better do it. Mother's doing it. And so even our fearful decisions, God can redeem them and God can use them. None of us is a big enough screw up that God says, well, I'm done with them. All of us can always come back on board. And however feebly we do it, we can lay that cloak, we can lay that palm branch, we can even be that donkey. The donkey's work, the lowly, the despicable, the animal that you only use if you've not got enough money for something better. And some of us feel like that, don't we? But you know, every physics professor starts teaching a year 7 kid how to put a plug together properly. I did that and I got 7 out of 10. And I remember getting that mark back thinking, well, with putting a plug together, you either get 10 or 0, don't you? You kind of can't get 7 and half electrocute someone, but that's by the by. Every bishop starts by helping run a youth club. Every marathon runner starts with a jog around the block that they are blowing and breezing about at the end of it. We all start with small things. The problem is, we live in a world and a culture where the large is glamorous, and we very rarely hear the small story that developed into the large one. This pandemic has limited so many of us to small activities, hasn't it? Where we can't do the large gesture. The table on Christmas Day was not overladen with children fighting over pigs in blankets, tired because they got up way too early, grandparents that were already asleep because they'd sipped half a sherry. Our birthdays, I've had 2 lockdown birthdays. They've been small, modest, wonderful for me, but different to how we would have liked them to have been. Our viewing of sporting events has been small. Maybe your team won their trophy this year and you could not celebrate it. Our awards at school, we couldn't walk down that aisle in front of hundreds of other pupils who were applauding cheering us on and receive it from our head teacher or our head of year. Holidays, they've gone. But some of the small things, like caring for a neighbour, like writing that email and we've got time to think about it more, so we've crafted it in a really kind way. Chatty friends here at the church, volunteers who've said, I will phone someone every week just to talk with them about life so that they have contact with somebody else in the church. Realising that our small group is about more than Bible study, and care for one another and praying with each other is so more valued on Zoom now than it was when we physically were present one with another. That walk that we could do with a neighbour, a friend, a family member became like gold dust as the dogs cocked their leg and we picked things up in bags and we opened up our hearts about all that was going on in our lives. For sure, the pandemic has shrunk what we have been able to do. But those small things, that donkey work, well, King Jesus can take it and he can multiply it. So however small your life has become, however much you feel like a donkey in this period, please keep putting one hoof, one trainer in front of the other. And let's see when we're all back together sometime later this year what God has, is, and continues to do.